everybody. Here we go again. Jackie Woodside here, the founder of the Curriculum for Conscious Living and the Conscious Living Summit. I am beyond excited today to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, my business coach, in fact, a leader in this field, someone who's been around this space of consciousness, awakening, and conscious living for a really, really long time. Ken D. Foster is an epic coach, author, speaker, has one of the longest running and best podcasts out there, Voices of Courage, the founder of the Courage to Change Everything Summit, the author of the Courage to Change Everything book. He is a stellar success human being coach, and I just love being around him. And I'm just so happy to introduce you today to Ken D. Foster. Ken, thank you for the time that you're giving to me and to this audience to really just dive in, right, about this topic of what the heck are we talking about anyway? What does it mean to be conscious and live a conscious life? So just get to know, our listeners a little bit, share a little bit about your path, your process, and how it relates to why I would want to have you featured on the Conscious Living Summit.
Thanks so much, Jackie. I'm so glad you're doing this summit. This is an amazing summit. People are learning so much and growing and getting out of their own ways so that they can open their minds and hearts to really hear this information, to really be able to make the changes that are necessary. I think of the Conscious Living Summit. I think of the Unconscious Living Summit.
Right.
That's where I lived up until about 1992. And I was walking around, just going through life, trying to buy the next car, find the next girl, buy the biggest house. I was just walking around thinking that's what life was. You go to college, you get married, you come out, you get a wife, you have some children. Whoa.
Yeah, I just want to interject there because you're saying, you're starting off with just brilliant nuggets. So that's a fine way to live, right? There's nothing wrong with living that way. It's not a bad way to live. But in my Curriculum for Conscious Living, I say that is the default life. You're living by default. It's just the formula and the prescription that you've been handed. And yet it sounds like something led you to know there's so much more.
Well, it is the default life. And in unexamined life, by the way, we'll get into that a little more, I believe. Most people come on the planet and they don't really change much till the time they leave the planet. So that's how I would define an unconscious life. But a conscious life is defined a little differently. 1992, when I woke up, I heard this little voice that said, you've got to feel the pain to make the change. Took it to my psychiatrist at the time, and he looked at me and said, Ken, I've been seeing him for a year. He says, Ken, I can't do anything more for you. Follow that voice. And as I walked out of the office thinking, what is that voice I'm supposed to follow? But that voice was loud. Well, that was the voice of consciousness. That was the voice of courage, of wisdom, of understanding. And that voice, a couple of days later, led me to make a phone call to go and walk into a recovery center and to get recovery from all the addictions that I'd accumulated in my life. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen.
Yeah.
That's how I started living consciously, because the way that I was living didn't work.
Yeah, let's just pause there again. So powerful. So thank you for sharing that with our audience, because I'm just going to assume, given how prevalent addictions are in our world, right, Ken? I'm just going to assume that some people...
Listen, the audience needs to know this. There's the number one addiction in the world. And this is really, we're talking about conscious living here.
Yeah.
So what is the number one addiction in the world?
Ego.
It's the addiction to being right.
Yeah, the addiction to being right and getting your way.
Or thinking you're on the right path and doing the right thing when that other little voice, the inner voice that we all have is saying, don't do that. Stop. Do something new. But a lot of times we don't pay attention to that because we're seeking happiness outside of ourselves.
Yeah. So you're just so right on. I'm just going to assume some people listening to this are also maybe in the back of their mind, kind of like, is this an addiction? Is this a problem? So Ken, how did you know to start listening? Like, what was it about that voice versus all the other yamma, yamma, yamma that goes on in your head that sent you down a different path?
It was pain. It
Pain.
was,
That'll
it
do it,
was,
right?
yeah, it just was. At that time, when things were on the surface, I looked really great. I was a security principal stockbroker, running a $200 million organization, making tons of money, living in a beautiful home, had a beautiful relationship. On the outside, it looked all good. But the inside, the truth was, the relationship was falling apart. I was estranged from my wife and two children. I had friends that I would call today lower companions. These weren't friends that were uplifting me. These were friends that were competing with me and tearing me down for their own benefit, right? I was spending almost every dime I made. So, on the surface, it looked real good. But the truth was, it wasn't. It was an unconscious life.
Yeah.
And so to switch that took courage. It took courage. It takes courage. And so with the audience today, I would just, this conference takes courage just to listen to and to stay in for a while, because you're going to hear things you go, no, that's not true. That's the exact thing you need to pay attention to, quite frankly. Because if you keep paying attention to Albert Einstein said, we can't change a problem with the mind that created it, right?
Right.
So if your mind, if you don't listen and to those disruptive thoughts that the speakers are going to give you, like myself, then you're going to stay in the same lane. And maybe that's good news for you, but maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Your greatest thinking has got you right where you were. My greatest thinking got me right where I was in 1992. I did the best. If I could have done differently, I would have done differently.
Yeah.
I just didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So I had to get mentorship. I had to get coaching. I had to learn how to release the old dysfunctional ways of showing up. I had to let go of some of the programming that had got me to that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as I did, then it's funny. Life actually got literally brighter. I mean, there's a release program that I put together 20 years ago for my clients, and I did it because I put it together for me at first, right? And I'd go through this process, and literally after I was done writing it out, I look around. It's like life was like fluorescent. I'm like, this is really weird. Can our perception really change the outer experience, including colors? And the truth is, of course, yes, it can.
Absolutely.
That's about conscious living.
So
how do
awesome.
we get ourselves back to the garden, right?
Yeah.
Back to the soul. And let me just say one last thing, because I know you want to say something. But for a lot of us, the soul is covered with this kind of rust, okay? It's kind of a rust. We're all born genius. But then this rust forms. What's the rust? Well, it's the programming from our parents, from our teachers, from our schools. Some of that stuff is not true, and it blocks the soul. It's covered with our resentments, our anger, our guilt, shame, and remorse, our things that we wanted to work out but, quote, didn't work out, our failures. And when we start to remove that and re-identify ourselves with our soul and start to live consciously, that stuff fades away and life gets better and better. In fact, you walk around asking yourself, how can it get better than this? Because it gets better. It's amazing.
So I just have to dive in here, Ken, because what you're saying is just brilliant, by the way, in terms of conscious living. But so let's go back to pre-1992 when you started really kind of awakening, going into recovery. Yeah. A lot of people would have looked at your life and been like, the dude's got it going on.
Right.
So you're making a distinction here between success and soul, or success and conscious living. And yet I know you're wildly successful now. You're going on a great vacation with your family and traveling all over the country, going to national parks, visiting friends. You have crafted this incredibly successful life. So talk to me about that a little bit, because people back in 1992 would have looked at you like, the dude's got it going on. And yet what you're saying is that internally, not so much.
Well, here's what I'm saying. We can have it all. Okay, we really can have it all. Got to do the work. Takes a lot of work to have it all. But what is having it all? Well, having it all is the material stuff is great. I love nice cars and big houses and dressing up and going out and watching movies and doing all the outer things. I enjoy that as much as the rest of the people. But all of that is kind of a dream. Okay, it's the dream from the inner. It's the mindset that we have inside of ourselves that will create those outer experiences, for good or not. But there's something deeper than that, and this is about the conscious part of it. It's Einstein said, all I want to know are the thoughts of God. The
Yeah.
rest are details, right? That's all I want to know are the thoughts of God. Because the thoughts of God are the thoughts that empower us. They enliven us. They bring joy in our life. They bring fulfillment in our life. They connect us to people, places, and things in a profound way. You set, today I'll set my intention. Jackie and I were talking about, I'm taking this trip. I said, I'm going to set my intention to go help my granddaughter and take her stuff up to Idaho. And just that intention of being of service to another human being, all of a sudden that trip just expanded. People, places, things started showing up to, hey, Ken, come up to Sun Valley with me. Hey, Ken, come over to Colorado and hang us in Colorado. Hey, let's go see Glacier National Park. Why don't we go to Taos? My best buddy's down in Taos. All these things start showing up, right? And it's not me doing it. Okay. I mean, I have a part. I show up and make a phone call, but the timing of it all, everything shows up, synchronicity to have this incredible experience. That's what happens when we live consciously.
So
when we're not conscious, I guess there's a lot of people have developed their willpower to the point where they just push through anything. But I have to say, Jackie, and you probably experienced this, a lot of those folks end up coaching with me. I coach a lot of rich and famous and wealthy people and stars and that. A lot of them that come to me, they've put all this time, energy, and effort in building their empires, but now they're sick. They're sick mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, physically, a lot of them, and they're spending a lot of their money trying to get healthy.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what if we kind of change this around a little bit and create a little more balance and still had it all? That's what conscious living is to me.
It's awesome. And so talk a little bit more about that, creating a sense of balance. So a balance in what ways? And then the other thing I'd like you to speak to, I'll give you two things to kind of mull on. The other one is you talked about the soul when you were talking about your success before, that, maybe you had the houses and the marriage and the money and all of that, and the marriage was falling apart and the house wasn't that fulfilling. And what was missing was something at the soul level. And that's one of the things I really want us to think more deeply about is, what is the spiritual aspect of conscious living? So, either of those, I'd love to hear you pick up on those.
Well, I'll take them both. I laughed when you said balance because I'm a Libra, right? So, my whole life people are saying, oh, you're all about balance. Well, I can assure you prior to 1992, I was a Libra out of balance. And out of balance was really living from the outside in. In balance for me is living from the inside out. How do we live from the inside out? Well, we get to a point where we understand who we are, what we stand for, and how we serve. Who we are, what we stand for, and how we serve. So who I am, and we eventually figured this out. We came here as an infinite being, an infinite soul filled with joy and goodness and light. The yogis call it Sat Chit Ananda. Sat, C-H-I-T, Ananda. Sounds like shit, but it's chit. Ananda. So it's ever conscious, ever aware, and ever new bliss. That's at the essence of all of us, right? But, how do we get back to that? Well, we start doing the inner work. What's the inner work? Well, I've written a book all about that. It's called The Courage to Change Everything, Daily Strategies and Essential Wisdom to Awaken Your Inner Genius, meaning the soul, right? So the way I did it, and the way I think most of us do it, is we find mentors, we find coaches, but we mostly pay attention to our heart that guides us to exactly where we need to be. I have a quick story around that.
Yeah.
I was in Sacramento, right, 1993 it is, I think. And so I've woken up. I'm doing things differently, and I learned to meditate, and I'm meditating. And as I sit in meditation, out of the ethers come this eagle that comes right into my consciousness, and I felt it go through my entire body. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life, and I thought, wow, that's really weird. So I thought, and then in that same meditation, I knew it was time to get back to San Diego, which is where my family was, my home was. I needed to get. So I got in the car, and I'm driving down the Central Valley of California, and I see 7 eagles on the way down, and I thought, this is really interesting.
Wow,
I've
7
never
eagles.
seen 7 eagles on the way down. And these weren't hawks. They weren't big red-tailed hawks. These were eagles. Okay, they were the golden eagle is what I saw. I think I saw a couple of the what are the other ones? The
bald eagle.
Bald eagles, right? So I get to San Diego and I drive in, and I'm kind of following my heart. I'm following where to go, and I see this bookstore, and it's called The Psychic Eye. And I thought, well, I'll go in and see if there's something I should get there because I'm feeling drawn to it. I'm following my heart. I go in the bookstore. There's all these books, spine first. I pull out the first book and I look at it, and it's the picture of the eagle that I saw in meditation that came through my entire body. And it was a book written by Ken Kesey. It's called Return of the Bird Tribes. You can look it up to see the eagle that I saw. Here's the point. The point is what I just talked about. Following our heart is how we get conscious. How do we know what our heart is? That's when you're first waking up, it's like, what does heart even mean? Well, heart is that place where intuition is born, right? We all have a gut feeling, right? Most people have undeveloped intuition, right? They'll bet on the stock and it goes up. Wow, that's interesting. How can I do that again? They can't do it again. They had an intuition that this would go up. But we can develop that. And how I learned to develop it was through meditation, through stilling the mind, right? The brain is a tool. It's not who you are, right? There's a lot of, you read books. I've read hundreds of books, I think now, on near-death experiences and watched videos and, all about the soul. And as the soul leaves the body or stays, whoever's around the body till the body is healed and comes back in. But, the point is this, is that when you start to develop that intuitive part of yourself, when you start to develop and realize there's something a lot greater than ourselves going on here, that's really the first step with intention to becoming conscious every day. And again, how do we know we're conscious or unconscious or when we're in it or not? It's a feeling, right? Listen, I can tell you when I'm not conscious. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm in a place where somebody's just, I feel like I've lost something. Yeah. I'm not going to get what I want. You did something. You said something. That I'm completely back to this living from the outside in.
Yeah.
But when I'm conscious, you can say anything to me. You can tell me I'm a schmuck. You can tell me I'm a no good liar, a cheat, whatever you want to tell me. And I'm in a place that's centered. And I realize that that's not about me. That's about whatever that experience is for the other person.
And that leads to a super important next question. And thank you for everything you said. You're making it just so clear. And I love that you're talking about meditation, that part of conscious living is being able to attend to what the mind is doing and quiet the mind. So that's really 2 steps. First of all, just being able to pay attention to what is the mind doing anyway, and then really developing some mastery over it. So I love that. Meditation is and the mind is such an important part of conscious living. But I love what you just said, because we all get pulled into those places where the ego takes over. We're angry, we're jealous, we're frightened, we're feeling angst. What do you do, Ken, when you find yourself, it's like, you find yourself in that place, you've gone unconscious. How do you bring yourself back to that presence and center?
Well, I think one of the practices I've had, I laugh when I smile when you ask that, because I go to forgiveness, and I usually either asking for forgiveness or forgiving myself.
Or both.
For both, right? For those unconscious moments that we all have. But so here's what I found. I found that I did some study on this, and the social scientists have done a study around feeling and how fast a feeling passes through our body, which is 90 seconds. 90 seconds, right? I thought that's interesting. I would watch my granddaughter, Ella, when she was 4 or 5, and I noticed she'd be kicking and screaming, all upset. And sure enough, 90 seconds or so, she's just happy, hugging me. And the world is great. So little kids know this. They know how to get out of those feelings really quick. We've lost it, because what happens then, if you're not out of your feeling in 90 seconds, then what's kicking in? What's the mind? It's the memory of remembering, right? Or resenting, okay, resending it through your body time and time again. Those old thoughts. So the first thing I suggest is you set an intention and a goal. 90 seconds, you're going to let go of those feelings pass through your body, whatever they are. Okay. Now, I'm talking about general feelings. If you have grief or immediate loss or things like that, you need to feel the feelings and go through the grief and allow yourself to be in that state until it passes through. Deep emotional states have lessons in them for all of us.
Sure.
So I'm not talking about moving in spiritual bypassing. I'm talking about normal everyday emotions. When somebody says something to you, or you lose a candy bar, or you lose your diamond ring, those kind of things, right? Okay, 90 seconds. And then the other part for me is breath work. A lot of breathing. It's amazing what 6 conscious deep breaths will do. Just a deep breath in, hold it, tense your body for a second, double exhale out. Try that, just 6 breaths. And then the third thing I like to give to you is this. It's become the observer, okay? So as soon as you can pop out and just observe the situation, you're not in your emotions. You become the observer of it. And if you can do that and you practice that time and time again, just observing, not going into judgment, is this good or bad or right or wrong, or I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. Just observe it, notice it, and then be kind to yourself or kind to others around that.
Yeah.
Those 3 techniques work really well.
Nice. Once you notice it, you can pay attention to that 90 seconds, let it pass
exactly.
through, and then move yourself to the next higher state. That's lovely.
And by the way, Jackie, if all else fails, then run out of the room, move yourself out of the environment, change your environment. I used to do that with my little baby Brooke when she was a tiny girl. She was in my arms and she'd be crying. What I do? I'd change her state. I'd change her physiology. I'd lift her up, put her in my arms. I'd go over and I'd start showing her pictures, and I'd change her, like I said, her emotional, her focus and her physical state. And we can do that ourselves, right? Yeah. Just get out of the environment, take a walk, and then focus on something that is higher thinking than maybe where we've been.
Yeah. I love it. So Ken, I also know, because you're my business coach, I also know that you are a very astute and skilled businessman. How do you bring conscious living? What's the intersection for you of consciousness, conscious living, and how you operate and what you do in your business? So just speak a little bit about that.
It's not personal and business life. It's all together.
Nice. I say that all the time. I love that.
Yeah.
We have one life that God has given us, some of which we get paid for, some of which we do not, but it's all your life.
Well, in my unconscious state prior to 1992, I segmented my life. I had certain friends that I would see here and there and here, and I would speak away this way. Everything was segregated. Not today. It's all together. How I show up in business is how I show up in my life.
Yeah.
When I think of consciousness, when I think of a story of Brian Clemmer. Brian Clemmer was a personal development leader, a man I respected. I was on stage with him and Laurel Langemeyer, another conscious leader.
Sure.
And I had the privilege of interviewing Brian. Brian was a West Point graduate, and a lot of people haven't heard of him, but he had developed a personal development brand at the time as large as Tony Robbins. He was out there. And he sat down with me and I said to Brian, I said, let's talk about integrity. Because integrity ties right into consciousness for me.
Yeah.
And it ties into your question of business.
Yeah.
And he said, well, Ken, let me tell you a story. He said, I had a person come to me, a friend of mine, and he asked me to speak at his event, and he asked me to speak for free. And he said, I gave him my word. I would go there and speak for free at his event. A week later, somebody came up and another company came up and said, we'll pay you $25,000 to speak, but it has to be on that day and time that he already told his friend he'd speak for free. He said, I turned down the 25,000. He said, but not for the reason a lot of people think. He said, I turned it down because I know that if I were to compromise my integrity and my word and my mind, he said, the next time that something came along that was going to be a little better than the next, he said, I would compromise it too. And he says, that would stop me from manifesting the way I manifest. He says, my mind's like a match. It's on fire. When I say it's going to do something, bam, it happens. It does it. That's conscious living, right? Mm-hmm. That's when we realize, we learn how to use the power of the mind, because the mind is the way that we will either stay in bondage or liberate ourselves. It is through the power of the mind and mastering the mind. So the mind is not the brain. The mind is over the brain, right? That's the soul.
Right.
So, when we're connected to that, we realize how important it is to stick with our word and whatever we do. I
love that. So integrity is a really critical part of living a conscious life, doing what works, keeping your word, being a person of honor. I totally love that. And I love what you said too about that your friend turned down that money.
Love that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just so awesome, because when you keep your word, when you're living consciously, bringing that back, it will come back to you. So that's just, it's just such a great principle right there. And, really, I'm so glad that you brought that up about the piece around integrity.
Well, there's another friend of mine who wrote the foreword to my latest book, Stephen M.R. Covey. And he wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. I think that book sold about 3 million copies so far. Stephen wrote that book because really trust comes from integrity and conscious living.
Right.
And what happens with trust, it's amazing. I put several businesses together now.
Yeah.
And they're based on trust. It doesn't mean I don't have contracts and agreements.
Yeah.
But when I brought people in, we had a business this year. We brought some people in that all of a sudden I didn't trust them. I could feel it. There was something in their agenda. And other partners, because my partners are all conscious, they're like, yeah, there's something going on. We had to ask that person to leave. So because that trust factor is so important, that when that person was in there, the creativity stopped, shut us down. As soon as that person was gone, everything opened up again, right? So that's about conscious living. It's about noticing, what is the energy? Is this flowing? Is this partner right for the project? Yeah. Is this partner not right for the project? Doesn't mean that person was a bad person or evil or anything. Yep. They're an amazing person, an amazing, accomplished person. It just wasn't the right match for
it's honoring that inner sense of intuition, as you talked about earlier. Yeah,
absolutely.
Honoring that. Yeah. So great.
So that I hope I answered that about business, right? So we're
and how does that come into, how does consciousness or conscious living come into how you direct, guide, work with your clients?
Well, with business, with my clients, we all start with first thing I ask everybody is, what about success is important to you? I ask this to my coaching clients. I ask this to my business partners. And I ask them a second question. What about life is important to them? Now, am I interested in their life, in their successes? Well, sort of. I want to know what they've done. But what I'm really after is their values. When you ask those two questions, I know what your driving values will be. So you can do this, take those 2 questions, go ask a couple of people about it. Okay.
Sure.
It's really good.
It's great.
So, we start with values. In business, we start with values. Then we also start with my clients. I always like to start with, well, what's working, what's not working, and what can we do to improve it, right? So the what's not working, a lot of people can really get to that fast. It's amazing how many of us know, well, this isn't working.
Right.
It's kind of funny when I ask, well, what is working? Well, a lot of times they have to think about that, right? Well, what we want to do is kind of flip that model, right? We want to start really focusing on noticing on what's working in our life, okay? And also, of course, daily take steps to improve on what's not working.
Yeah.
And I teach my clients a system, right? It's called introspection. It's not new to me. It's or exclusive to me. I didn't invent it. But every evening, it's sitting down and asking 4 questions, right? What worked? What didn't work? What can I improve? And the 4th question, who do I need to forgive today or let go? Okay. 4 questions. That's it. That forgiveness piece is important now, right? A lot of times I encourage people to start with themselves. Gosh, I'm a imperfect, messed up human being that didn't do the right thing today. I hurt somebody's feelings, or I didn't keep my own commitment, or I fell off the goals that I was trying to accomplish. But having compassion, deep compassion, which is about conscious living for ourselves and others, this helps. Why is all this important? And why is conscious living even important? And I'll tell you, this is what I've learned, Jackie. It's about energy. Okay. It's about vibration and frequency.
I love
so
that.
For instance, fear has an energy to it. When you're afraid, you, me, and everybody, we get constricted. We feel it in our bodies.
Yeah.
Our minds get dumb. We shut down. We go to fight or flight. Courage has a feeling too. Courage is when you tune into courage, you ask yourself, if I was courageous, what would I do now? Or if I was courageous, what's the worst? Can I do the worst first now? When you tune into courage is a feeling. It's expansive. It's powerful. It's an energy. It's a vibration.
Yeah.
If I were to muscle test you, right, with your sphere of influence, and you were in a state of courage, your influence would literally go out hundreds of thousands of miles. So ask a practitioner who knows how to do this to muscle test you. They'll show you that. And when you're in fear or anger or resentment, your influence goes out about 8 to 10 feet. It's designed that way.
Right. So how do people develop courage if they're maybe tend toward be anxious or tend toward being fearful? How do you increase that sense of courage?
Well, the way that I recommend it is do one thing that you've never done before every day for the next 30 days. Okay. Go eat one thing you've never eaten before. Go share a story with somebody you've never shared that story before. Go out and look at what you could improve or develop or grow. Create a new website. Go out and hire somebody on your team that you've never done. You felt uncomfortable. Set your intention daily, not once every 30 days, daily, to go into what I call the void, right? You don't know how you're going to get there. I wrote a book in 2003. It's called Ask and You Will Succeed. Daily, it's 1,001 ordinary questions to get extraordinary results. I want to tell you something. There's not one how question in that book. Not even one. 1,001 questions, not a how question. Why is that? Because most people, when they go to how am I going to do that, it shuts them down.
Right.
Not everybody. So if you're the exception, great. You're the exception. You're amazing. You've mastered your life. I love you. Thank you for that. But most people, we have to go with what are the most courageous steps I could take today? Or what is it I can do to expand my life, expand my presence today? All right.
So great.
Okay.
So great. I love that. You know, you are a courageous human being. You help others be courageous. It's such a gift that you bring to the world. If people want to get in touch with you, Ken, if they want to hear more about what you're doing or look at the coaching that you offer, the programs that you offer, how do people reach you?
You know, the easiest way to reach me is just go to my website, kendfoster.com. Ken D as in Donald, foster.com. Right on the homepage there, you can, I'm giving away that release exercise that I talked to you about.
Nice.
You can get that just as my gift to you.
Nice.
And also, if you'd like to actually have a session with me, you think that listening to me, I would be a really great mentor and coach for you, then you can sign up for a complimentary session right there, and we'll see if we have a match.
Perfect.
Love to connect with you.
Beautiful.
Also, I'd like to say one last thing is, if we don't need courage or inspiration or motivation now and then. We need it every day, and we need it several times a day.
Yeah.
So you can listen to my radio show, my podcast. It's a radio podcast TV show at voicesofcourage.us, or just tell Cortana, Siri, or Alexa to play Voices of Courage podcast. It'll come right up for you.
Oh, that's great.
And also, you can also get my book, couragetochange.us, couragetochange.us.
Oh, great. Such a contribution. You know, Ken, I love interviewing the people on the summit, and I love being around people who are masterful. And, you really have a gift. You just, your heart speaks so loudly, the kind of heart that you have for humanity and for helping people to grow and expand into their highest and best self. So thank you for that. Thank you for your contribution to my life and to this summit. It's just a delight to work with you. So thanks,
Jackie. I received that, and thank you for that. And masters tend to hang around with masters. So you are doing an amazing event here, and you are really touching the lives of so many people. For those of you that don't know Jackie or just learning about Jackie, I can tell you this: she's one of the most high integrity people I know. She's always working on herself. She walks her talk, and she's got some amazing programs that if you're working with her or you're part of what she's doing, I put money on this for you. Your life and your business will get better and better as a direct of working with Jackie. So I just want to put that out there. You didn't ask me to do that.
I did not.
I know who you are, and I know that people will benefit from working with you.
It's so awesome. Thanks so much for that, dude. You're the best. All right. Peace out, Cam. We'll talk next time.